Oh, embarrassing. Thank you. Yeah, we're good. And
What
then
does his shirt say?
come here, Liam.
I gotta see that shirt. Oh, awesome. I love it.
It was given to him, but yeah.
Nice.
All right, let me make sure that we're recording because just in case we have that. All right. Hey everyone. Sorry if you had jumped on before and saw that little blurb. We are continuing our dismantling of ethnic studies, and today we wanted to talk about what liberation education looks like. And the thing is that we haven't seen it in K-12 yet, but we have seen disastrous accounts in colleges around the country, starting as early as the 1960s in California. And surprisingly, what we found in what we were looking at today in the ethnic studies was that they got a lot of their inspiration from the 1960s in California. So the first thing I wanted to do was have my friend Lynn, who is a former teacher and also taught a cultural studies department in college, speak first. So, go ahead, Lynn.
Okay. Carrie asked if I would give an introduction of one of the writers and developers of this particular ethnic studies curriculum, Christine Slater. But I was thinking about this morning, and in order to speak to the present, we have to understand and look at the past. I know that I grew up in California, both North and Southern California, so I've been all over the place there. And I know that we've experienced growing pains as a nation in learning and developing along the way, but that's to our advantage. And I once heard a Black man say, we've made mistakes, but the beauty of America is that we have the freedoms and the ability to change them. And as we've been talking, and discussing the things that have been going on in this curriculum and seeing the way the world is turning at this particular time, we're presently undergoing a threat to our national health and survival. And this is laid at the feet of our children. And whether people choose to look the other way or not, we are sending them off to school to become activists. I have a friend up in Portland, Oregon, who has a national organization, and of course, Oregon is kind of the, it's kind of a little seedling place to dissidents. But she said that they are working so hard to get conservative whites out of the schools so that they can teach what they want to have them learn. Just as the population of children, which is really frightening. And like I said before, I grew up in California, and as a little girl, I watched this dissidence. My uncle was a professor at UC Berkeley and Stanford. And so I remember watching the television, and I believe it was in the very beginning of this curriculum where they talked about peaceful rallies. Well, from my experience and looking at the television, watching the news, they were not peaceful. They were very aggravated, and the people around the areas, they felt that repercussion. So knowing that this isn't the case and watching this movement go through the years, in my opinion, I feel that the nation as a whole has been trying so hard and has achieved this wonderful sense of unity in so many areas. Are we all perfect? No, we're not. We all have the ability to rise or fall, but overall, I've seen wonderful things that have taken place in the brotherhood with people. And it's very troubling to me to witness this deliberate attempt to segregate. And we talked about this yesterday. And this curriculum that we're analyzing right now attempts to display a text that sounds lovely and intelligent and compelling. But as we're sitting here breaking it down, it's quite the opposite in nature. Now I'll just go back to addressing Christine Slater. She was born in Oregon. Okay. And she received her degree from the University of Wisconsin. She's taught in the state of Washington and earned her recognition as professor emeritus at California State University, Monterey. She's heralded as a professor and an educational reformer and has written numerous books. If you go online, you'll be amazed at the amount that she has written, but I'm just going to mention a couple. And those, whoever wants to go into the online sources and read, you certainly can do that. But one of her books is called Multicultural Education as Social Activism. Another one is Critical Race Theory and its Critics. Another is White Bread. And so again, like I said before, they're right there online. So you can go in and look and see for yourself what it is that she's going into. Her philosophy is to transform learning in schools across the curriculum and across the nation. And just very quickly, so I don't take up anybody's time, as we've seen the curriculums, the curriculum that we've been looking at, its very nature of construct is divisive. It's been focusing on bigotry, oppression, and misrepresentation, and laying the burden of such claims to white supremacy and capitalism, leaving our white students as a non-ethnic and suppressive part of the world's population, which of course this is very upsetting.
I think it's important to also mention that they're also leaving Asians out as well.
And that's true. They are leaving the Asians out. This is everything but unifying and healthy. And I just want to mention one thing. Like Carrie said, I, with a Native American girl, developed an ethnic studies program, if you will, but it was in the very beginning, it was an American studies program at the University of Southern Utah. And it was a wonderful experience because my classes were across the board with diversity in students. The whole feeling behind that classroom, the curriculum that was being taught, the activities that we were engaged in was very unifying. We shared each other's differences to the point where we even had, I know, don't laugh at this. We shared recipes. Yes, we did. Okay. And we shared jokes. Yes, we did. And, if you were to sit and listen to some of those jokes under the suppression that's happening right now, where you can't open your mouth and say anything, those jokes among all of those students that were of different races that sat in that classroom were hilarious. They were so fun, and there was no ill effects meant. It was just a sharing. And so it opened up a whole perspective to each one of the races that sat there, listened, and participated in that classroom. It was exciting to go to every day because there was a unity in that classroom. There was an understanding in the curriculum that didn't separate us. It bound us together. And it's like we spoke about yesterday, in the fact that our world is becoming much smaller. And there isn't, I would dare to risk saying that there is hardly a family out there that doesn't have some type of interracial
No,
family members. You know what I mean?
right.
It's such a beautiful thing, and it's being turned into this
Well, and that's one of the things that we
separatist.
will eventually see in the model policy, is that there is an attack on critical family studies. But today we're really going to focus on the opposite. So what you're saying in your classroom is that these kids could come in and they could hear different points of view and even laugh at jokes that today might be considered quote unquote racist. But they did not assume ill will.
No.
And I think that's why people could get along. And the reality is that behind closed doors, people still are doing that. People are still making their jokes. They're still laughing. If you go to a specifically like male environment, a factory, the jokes that are being told in there. And these are people who respect each other, like each other, would consider each other sometimes even like brothers. But they say things that today our colleges are teaching you that you need to be offended by.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
And thank you, Lynn. Okay, go ahead, Brooke. I could jump on.
Okay. Do you want me to just start with the background
Yes.
of the, okay, here we go. Okay, so in my research about the background of the ethnic studies program, I would Google it and just find all of these articles. And I finally found this one woman who identifies herself as she participated in it, and she was a librarian. And what I've really found interesting about her account was she gave all of the demands that they had and the problems they were facing. And I'm just going to skip to the part where it says, this just kind of gives a background information on it and their dissatisfaction with the government. It wasn't necessarily all about race relations. There were, the civil rights going on, but also there were the Vietnam War. And one of the things she said is they were protesting the college's practice of revealing students' academic standing to the Selective Service Office. Now, I think that's a valid concern, and I would definitely organize against that. We have with the Department of Justice in the Davis School District. But anyway, she also makes another point about the origin of this, and I think it's so important for the context that they came from comfortable middle-class families, and they were convinced of the importance of their ideas. And so here is what happened. So, there were white students who expressed hostility about the growing use of student funds for Black student education and activities. And so the editor published something and attacked, but then he was physically attacked by several Black students. And then that's when they started chanting because they wanted him not to have any consequences for the physical attack. And that's why the administration didn't want to say, hey, yeah, we're going to have no consequences whatsoever. We're going to totally get over to anarchy. Anybody can hurt anybody, no consequences because of the color of your skin. And so they're saying that they didn't want to teach these ethnic studies. But you'll see in their demands that they already were teaching these classes. They just wanted it labeled under a big umbrella of something else. They already had faculty teaching this. So, but I'm going to contrast this with NPR's account, just so you can see how warped it gets if you don't have the right sources. So this is NPR's spin on 1968. And so this is their website. And I just highlighted it right here. 50 years ago, studying the history and culture of any people who were not white and Western was considered radical. Completely false. San Francisco was teaching this stuff, but they twisted it to be nobody wanted this taught. What really happened is they wouldn't excuse or permit the violence. That's different. So let me just go back to her essay that I highlighted. That's her link, sorry. So anyway, I want to show you the demands to show you how unreasonable they were. And this wasn't about permitting people to study other cultures, which is what people claim it is not. So here's another guy. He was, there was suspension of an English instructor. He was just a graduate student, right? Not even a professor. Graduate student. And at another college, he had stated, "We are slaves, and the only way to become free is to kill all the slave masters." And then at another college, he said that Black students should bring guns to campus to protect themselves from white racist administrators. And then they forced President Smith to suspend Murray. So suspend a graduate student and who is advocating for violence, advocating for guns. So these are the main two incidents that caused it. Of course, they've spun it differently. Now, the demands that they wanted, there were two, the Black Student Union had demands, and then also the Third World something had demands. So they want all courses to be immediately, instructors receive full-time pay. So if you're a graduate student and you're just teaching one class, they want full-time pay. This is so unreasonable to me. And when you see the videos of them marching on the streets and saying, "We want justice," and they're interviewing, they're like, "They're not allowing this to be taught." And I'm like, you don't really have an idea what's going on and how sad. Go do your research, before you could form such strong opinions that you're going to go out and actively hate upon people. And consider different sources too. I have other sources in here. But then they wanted all Black students wishing so to be admitted in the fall of 1969. So, okay, what are the logistics about that? Is there enough room? Are they qualified? Have they graduated from high school? And I'm going to show you their settlement things to show you that, they were able to find ways around it. So here's some more demands. Let's see. Everyone who applies, non-white students, sorry, I forgot to highlight non-white students. Everyone who applies can get in. And their thing was, we don't have the authority. Maybe we don't have the money. We have to protect students, so they're going to sue us. And in fact, when we look at Evergreen, the professor who wasn't protected by the police did sue the university or this college, and he won $500,000 in a settlement because the police did not protect him. And so they're like, we have to protect our teachers and our students. How can we say, yes, you can have violence and we're not going to do anything against them? So they had to go through all this administration. And then one of their administrators was a Japanese administrator. They already had a Spanish speaking person on one of the intake applications there. So they had a diverse, from what I could tell or what I read, representation in leadership. So here is the demands, and here's where some of the settlement happened. So I like that they said all instructors employed full-time will receive full-time pay. I'm like, yeah, that's sensible. If you're full-time, you get full-time pay. Here's another one. He said they wanted all Black students to be admitted in the fall of 1969, approximately 500 qualified non-white students. So they said, yeah, you have to pass the test, you have to have the grades. I'm like, that sounds good to me. Don't change the qualifications, still keep up the level that you need to in a college atmosphere. So anyway, so how they paint this is so different from what it is. So here's the other one. It says, students charged with violent acts shall, if found guilty by the hearing panel, receive a penalty of not more than one suspension. So they're trying to work with these students who are just raging. And what I finally got out of it, let me just see where it is. I can't see my thing, but this was the lady's summary, and she was kind of for this movement. This is her summary of the whole situation. The idea that students and faculty could express their thoughts and somehow change a society that had become unwieldy and rigid, ponderous and oppressive. Now, I want to just flip it and say, you know, they can show that force and yelling and violence can change the whole society. You can force people to do anything if you're violent enough, right? To me, that's what it proved. And it's pretty scary because it's happening all over. I went online and I got the video of Evergreen to show this is Brett Weinstein, who considers himself a progressive, who did attend when he was not supposed to attend because no whites were supposed to go on campus that day. And he's the one who sued and got $500,000 because the police were not allowed to come in and protect him. So really, we have to protect individuals for their right to say their speech. And he never said anything that was racist, according to him, and even people who looked at it. But the mob mentality of wanting to fight against this it's a witch hunt. It's a modern day witch hunt where there's not the evidence to prove but it gives people satisfaction that somebody was burned at the stake. Yeah. And, you know, we have to be more intelligent and do more research than that. So there's
Julie,
that.
Do you have some thoughts on it? Julie?
No, I have not researched this area, so I'm sitting here and taking it in. Except I am a huge fan of Brett Weinstein.
Right.
Yeah, I'm impressed with what you found, Brooke. And it goes back to what I watched when I was a little kid in California, and the riots and the burnings, and this was going on campuses, and it just, yeah, it brings it all together from what I saw just as a kid. But thank you for that. That was really great.
I actually do have one thing to insert really quick. And that in my, I interviewed James Lindsay for 3.5 hours for my documentary. And one of the things I just finished timestamping that interview. And one of the things I asked him about was the overtake of universities, the Marxist communist takeover of universities. And he did share that they did try, with all this violence on campuses in the late 60s, that they really were trying to do like a hot Marxist revolution, but it did fail. And so a lot of these revolutionary people ended up going into education, and that's where they utilized their revolutionary feelings. So
well, and that's what we see in the curriculum, because we didn't just pull this randomly out of somewhere. This is literally, they are praising this in the curriculum. I think that Brooke is going back there now.
Yeah, because there's absolutely no indication of what really happened. And they even call it, and I hadn't gotten to what happened at UC Berkeley yet. They called it, I was on page 10. It's right here. They called it the bloodiest strike in UC history. And so I was just studying what happened in San Francisco. And they called the one in San Francisco, which became San Francisco State University, whatever, the most peaceful of all those that followed afterwards. And
right.
So,
but what's crazy is that they're praising this in terms of how to educate our children. Mm-hmm. That's, I mean, kids.
They're Marxists, and this is a Marxist revolution, and they want the kids to be Marxist revolutionaries. So of course they will.
And even the same slogans were being used in 1968. The main slogan that was being used was, oh dear, let me see where I can find it. Shut it down. And you can hear right here that they're yelling, shut it down in this one. And this is about Notre Dame and shutting down free speech. But it's basically shut it down in relation to the establishment administration, who is actually protecting them from, protecting them from physical harm, even though he wasn't. So,
right.
Go back to the flip book. So it's really concerning to me and scary that they're giving these kids a falsified sense of not only history, but how to discover history, how to look at history. Like, you're kind of like scientists, you experiment with it by taking in different perspectives and saying, this is what one person thought of it. Now, you always know there are at least two sides of the story. What is the side of administration? And just by seeing the demands and why they couldn't answer them, just that tiny word that says, we don't have the authority, maybe they don't have the authority to injure another person or to permit the injuring of another person. And that was their perspective. And if they would just put that in and say, the administration said they didn't have the authority to permit the injury of another person on their campus, then they're like, wait a second, what were they really demanding? What really spurred this on? And so this is so irresponsible and so dangerous in the way that they present these things in history that have been rewritten. They talk about rewriting history all the time.
Oh, yeah.
This is a complete rewriting of what actually happened. And thank goodness San Francisco has all these archives in here. And it's just historical essays by firsthand accounts. And, I took PDFs in case they take it down.
Okay.
I think that it so many times comes down to the money. So they didn't have the authority back then because there was more backing for the college than there was for the students. Today, there's more backing for the students. People are afraid to do what's right because there's money involved. We just saw just today in K-12, they had after school programs. And one of the after school programs was SEL, Discover Your Identity.
Oh,
And
I wonder what that means.
And a parent, and this is middle school, and a parent reached out and said, why are you doing this? And the principal openly said, we're doing this because we took money for funding and we would not be able to pay for the equipment if we did not put these classes in. And then of course you get the normal platitudes. These classes just teach kids how to think and be kind. So I could pull up the exact thing that he said, just in case maybe anybody wants to get me for misquoting. Just a second. Yeah, it is quite interesting the things that they're doing here. It says, in order for the equipment, snacks, and club advisors, in order to pay the equipment, snacks, and club advisors, etc., we must fulfill the certain branch requirements. Part of that includes lesson plans from the state, like social and emotional learning and SMART, which encourage positive behavior and thinking. We need to think about what positive behavior means, because we used to have this common thread that positive behavior was simply being genuinely kind and courteous towards one another. That is not what positive behavior means through social and emotional learning. It means that we have the right attitudes, often attitudes that mean that we need to reject our own personal identity, especially in religious viewpoints. But in other ways too, there are things that we can do that somebody else might find offensive. So remove religion. And if you're looking at somebody and their name was Janet yesterday and today it's Peter, and you are expected that your only way of being positive, the only way of being a courteous person is to call them Peter, even though yesterday they were Janet, and you are 12 years old and you don't understand what's going on, then you have to bow down to this. That's extremely concerning. And the people that we're bowing down to are the people who are lying about what's happened in history.
Well, and that's why it's so important. Oh, Brooke, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to. I thought there was a pause.
You go ahead.
You said they're lying to you, and this is just a second account of putting intentions when you can't determine intentions. And this was they said there was prejudgment and there was a physical confrontation. So the first guy published porn about an athletic department faculty. And they said, how come you forgave him, but these guys punched him up, beat him up, and you didn't forgive them? And they said, because you're racist. Well, the first one, there was no physical harm done, but the second one, there was. And so there's all this name calling put in about his actions were racist. And you can even hear it in this woman's narrative. She says, and so I believed it and I stood up for it. And you can see all the people who believed it and are marching. And that's what's scary is this picture right here of all the people who are believing a false narrative. And like Julie says, because of their empathy, preying on our empathy. Sorry, you can go back to your thing, Lynn.
No, it's okay. That was very well said. I'll interject in a second. Just go ahead.
Okay. That's basically, this whole movement is a repeat of history. And the more we understand what happened, and I like to go back and say, well, what could have been done to change what happened at San Francisco State? And we have to change the narrative. We have to explain what really happened and show these accounts, which is what we're doing right now. We're trying to get to as many people as possible to say, come look at the truth. And it was written by people who supported the movement even. These are the demands that they had. And this is what is at the foundation of this ethnic studies program right now. It's not the ability to teach about other cultures. It's the ability to use violence and call names.
Well, so what it comes down to is a condition called post-traumatic slave syndrome. And that's apparently a real thing. At least there's a book about it. But what it comes down to is people who believe from the cradle that they are oppressed. And because they're oppressed, they're almost righteous in their oppression. So because of that, nothing that these people, which is not every Black person, obviously, but nothing that these people who believe that they're oppressed do can be faulted. So it started off with African Americans, and a lot of them are now heading up our education, heading up our legal systems. And these are people who you cannot have those conversations with, which in my experience has meant avoid is stay as far away from that crowd as possible. The problem is that we can't now because they now have power. And remember that there is no truth but power comment from the other day.
Mm-hmm.
They have the power. And they're not allowing you to avoid. They are not allowing your children to avoid. Instead, they're bringing what I can only describe as poison and toxicity into our schools. And basically, I don't mean to be hyperbolic here, but the only term I can think of is masochistic. There's so much hatred and there's so much resentment and jealousy that it's like, well, I'm mentally miserable because I've been miserable my entire life. And now I want everyone else to be as miserable as me.
Well, Carrie, you're looking at the educational system. I mean, that's what we're looking at right now. And that is a very huge monster. The only thing that we could possibly do that I can see, because you're not going to change those people that are in some type of power position, because they're bent on making sure that whatever they want to happen is going to happen. The only thing that we can do here on our level, grassroots, if you will, is what is being done right here on the curriculum that is being presented, to make sure that those things that are being claimed which obviously you can say anything, but you better prove it. So you have all this information is what they've got in this curriculum to be sent around to all the schools throughout the nation. And so the holes need to be found as to their weakest point of conversation. They have no statistics. They have only verbal claims. And what I've been hearing here today, and from my experience living in California as a kid, their claims are they're anything but valid.
Sure. The problem is that there is an excuse for that. Excuse isn't the right word, if anybody has the right word, but we've seen that Smithsonian, logic is whiteness. So,
How you change that? We could talk about this all day long, and
right.
And the politics of this whole mess is another issue unto itself. But what we're trying to do here is show someone who's got some type of power to prohibit this type of curriculum being filtered in through the schools. And they're not satisfied with an ethnic studies class. They want it integrated through all of the disciplines in the school.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the structure of it, it says it's a double helix, with one of the strands being teaching about culture, which I think we all agree on, and the other strand being teaching critical consciousness, which is the poison pill part of it, which is the oppressed versus oppressor dynamic. And we did have a president at one time that did there was an executive order to ban the teaching of critical race theory in the schools, but that was reversed pretty soon afterwards. And as long as, but I mean, we have to do what we can to get this out or prevent it from taking hold in our states where we live.
Julie, can you, what page is that on about the double helix?
I believe it was page 15.
Because there's a part right before it that I think is important that we hit. It was right before.
Yeah, double helix.
Double helix. So right before it, they present this beautiful way that we should be learning.
Right.
And it sounds wonderful, right? Competing perspectives and narratives, and encourage them to form their own opinions. Care should be taken to ensure that teachers present topics with multiple points of view and represent diverse stories and opinions within those groups, staying within the realm of inclusion and humanizing, of course. So the diverse opinions, but not those who disagree.
Yes, or not even the administration, inclusive of only these voices and not the other side, just our side.
Exactly. So, people who are short and people who are tall and people who are skinny and people who are fat, as long as they all think the exact same way.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, teaching resources represent a range of different perspectives. Lessons are structured so students examine materials from multiple perspectives and come to their own conclusions. And then we get to the double helix. So you only can come to your own conclusions if they are within their idea of what's acceptable. That is, I just think that's extremely telling. Cultivate empathy. Oh, go ahead. Yes.
Oh, when you're done, I have a question for you.
Sure. Just the cultivating empathy. Again, empathy, when they say it, I interviewed a man, Alvin Louie, and he does Courage is a Habit. And when they say cultivate empathy, we think, oh, put yourself in someone else's shoes. But they have a very different definition of many of these words. Go ahead, Brooke.
I just like part of combating this whole thing is teaching our kids how to research. And the thing I struggled most with was I didn't know how to research these people and why they were named. I don't know what their contributions were and how it would make a difference in what is right before my eyes. And so just knowing who they are, they celebrate things and leave out other things for the heroes of communism or whatever it is. And so I wondered if you knew any of these people or had any background information and what sources you go to find that, because you know, searching on the internet may not be what it once was, and finding access to these documents. Julie, I know you have experience with this, didn't you say once that your documentation no longer pulls up on a Google search where you got it before?
That happens all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And apparently Google only gives you now the first 100 things for any search term, and they carefully curate what those 100 things are, and they don't do anything beyond that. So yeah, information is being disappeared from the internet. But as far as like those names of people, the one that I recognize is W.E.B. Du Bois, and I believe he's one of the forerunners of critical race theory.
Okay.
So Carter G. Woodson would be considered a conservative by today's standards. He did create Black History Month, but he really truly was about Black excellence and rising above. And so many things he said, like, never be beholden to one political party who says that they will give you what you want. So it's interesting that he's on the list, but the thing is that if you pick and choose, very similar to Martin Luther King, if you pick and choose, you can find things about Martin Luther King that make him lean Marxist. And then there are people who will say, no, he was a Christian minister, so this is where he stood. But if you pick and choose, you can find things about most of these people that would appeal. Remember, when they brought out social and emotional learning, their campaign was how to sell SEL to parents. So all of these things that you see when you're just quickly looking and you don't take the time to do a deep dive, you can go, oh, that sounds good to me, until you see words like Chicanics and Latinx. And, there's, like I've said before, many Hispanic people or people of Latin American or Latin heritage who think that is weird. They just do. And so there are things that you might see and you might point out and go, yeah, no, that's woke, I'm not interested. But they do put a lot, they lace it a lot. If you just read the paragraph before and didn't read the paragraph afterwards from the double helix, you might go, there's nothing wrong with this. It sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think knowing who these people are, I mean, I remember a book we were studying called Lies My Teacher Told Me. It was in the Graduate College of Education. And I was like, oh my gosh, Lincoln did this and this. And I really had to reconcile that our heroes are imperfect, and that our villains have good things about them too. And that should make us more prone to give grace to people and to take the good things that come instead of vilify them. Because if we really buy into vilifying and holding people accountable for all of this stuff, there would be no one left standing, and we wouldn't want to stand either, because we'd be too afraid, because we know we're imperfect. And so this whole culture of vilifying and praising and whatever, it's like, yeah, these are the contributions, and they still stand even if they biffed it, or yeah, they did something wrong. Like, I still believe that all the good that Martin Luther King did, even if he did X, Y, and Z, that good is still there and still existent in our society today. And so it doesn't nullify the contributions because you're imperfect. So, I think teaching that approach in our thinking, in our study of history, and also in our interactions with each other, it will just make it, this whole approach of vilifying everyone and holding them accountable, it's that worldview that messes this whole study up. You could have a beautiful ethnic studies program if it didn't have to be couched in oppressor and oppressed and reparations and who did this wrong,
But
Exactly.
what you're talking about is empathy. What you're talking about is having actual empathy and going, oh, and every single human being is flawed, and every single person has beauty within them. But this new empathy is saying, no, if you are the wrong kind of flawed, there's no forgiveness, there is no redemption. Get down on your knees and profess your guilt for the rest of your life and also give me half your stuff or more.
But when I say that, when I say that it's teaching empathy, what my brain hears is we're going to use your empathy against you to get more power.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, they're teaching equity. The only thing is, and I came up with this, I woke up this morning and I was just hit with this idea that all of these people who are now the experts in empathy and the experts in critical whatever, justice, whatever, they're making a crap load of money, right? And none of them are going to give up their money and live in, say, a $300,000 home so that we can all be equitable. So they're just a bunch of hypocrites.
Well, they're doing the exact thing that they say we're doing. So when you said the only truth is power, they're saying here is intersectionality. This is where power, this is the only truth that absolutely exists. And they're the ones that are getting the power. They're the ones who are claiming all of the power by saying this is where the power is. And you look at that instead of at them getting the power through the division and the Marxist.
Yes, they're saying so much stuff about, and I think this is where we'll leave off. They are recolonizing our country to fit their really, really warped vision of a brighter future.
Yeah, can I just say one thing about that really, really, really quick? So Paulo Freire wrote The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which a lot of this stuff is based on. And then I'm getting this, I get information from James Lindsay again, because he puts so much great stuff out. And they've hijacked the whole purpose of education. Paulo Freire's whole point was education is not for teaching reading and writing and like academic stuff. No. It's to radicalize it's to radicalize the kids and the students and to give them their critical consciousness that they will then go forward and tear down the systems of power. And so that's what all of this is. It's education is no longer for developing minds. It is to create critical consciousness, radicalize the students.
Why don't you tell that to all the parents that are still, my God.
Well,
so
that's
many
what we're trying to
parents.
do, right?
Yeah,
We're trying.
exactly.
So friends, if you are watching and you are getting anything out of this, please hit the like button, please subscribe. We have only about 660 more pages to go. I should say 666 more pages to go. But we only have a certain amount of pages left to go to get through this curriculum that's really in depth and really truly alarming of what they want to do to our kids. So on that note, I think we'll say goodbye because we don't want to keep them too long, and we will see you next time. Bye guys.
Bye.
Bye.